said it had decided that the U.S. government would be less likely to help them repay creditors in a crisis. And Japan's three biggest banks expect second-half profits to fall, reflecting uncertainty over whether economic recovery can be sustained. But ahead of that, stocks ran up during the last half, lifted by Abenomics and boosting the bank's results. Mitsubishi, UFJ, Sumitomo, and Mizuho increased combined profit to $23 billion. And Manchester United returned to profit last quarter as broadcasting and commercial revenue increased. The club made $3.5 million in the 3 months through September. Now, United forecasts full-year revenue will be around $650 million, taking it closer to Europe's wealthiest clubs, Real Madrid and Barcelona. Shares closed up more than 2% in New York. And those are the company news. I'm AngieLau.
Recognize anybody? Okay. Listen, we're very pleased today to have the talented and charming AngieLau with us. I want to tell you a little bit about her career, and then I'm going to ask some softball questions and get it set up for you doe-eyed killers to ask the really hard ones that we've been teaching you about, okay? In her career in television news,
this is also
Angie's
a yacht,
worked...
and it could be yours. Well, it's sort of a yacht. The Italian design firm Lazzarini has created the...
Angie's worked both in Canada and the United States. After graduating from Ryerson University in Toronto, she went to CBC, first job, and then to...
Well, I was at BCTV first, and then CBC.
Okay. British Columbia Television.
That's right.
Then CBC.
Yes, and then CTV in Toronto.
So working her way through the Canadian markets.
That's it.
And then she moved south to my home state of Cleveland, Ohio, and went to work for WEWS,
That's right.
where she won a ton of awards for consumer and investigative reporting. And then from there, she moved over to Bloomberg, where she was working, doing commodities and reporting for all the affiliates.
Yes.
And most recently, moving to Hong Kong. And as you can see, becoming an anchor and reporter here at Bloomberg. So we're very pleased to have Angie with us today. Last spring, she hosted me at the Foreign Correspondents Club, which she's on board of governors, right? And she's also a member of the American Asian Journalists Association.
That's right.
All kinds of good things that she's done in journalism, helping to teach young journalists like you with a journalism camp. And coming here and answering your questions about careers, which I think is incredibly important today because I know that we're all a little bit nervous about that. So that being said, let's give a warm welcome to AngieLau. My pleasure.
Well, it's a pleasure for me.
Because you have been, you guys don't know how lucky you are. I mean, I would kill to be in your class with Professor Seitz. He's one of the most...
Most of them would just like to kill me.
Yeah. He's one of the most talented journalists I've known. So lucky to know him personally, because professionally I've been a fan and admirer of his work years before. So it's just so nice to be in the same spot of the world at the same time.
This is called softening up the interviewer. Should we go easy on her?
No.
Yeah, okay. Well, Angie, that's very kind of you, but they want to hear about you,
Okay.
definitely. What little they know about me, that's probably all they want to know. The thing that I did want to address with you is that a lot of our students, especially those that come from Asia, have to do something very difficult early on in their journalism career. I think I know what you guys, you're guessing what I'm going to say here. They have to ask their parents if they can study journalism. Almost none of them really want them to pursue that career. Did you face the same thing in your family?
I'm happy to say that I did not have that. I had a lot of great support, and I think the best gift any parent can give their child is the gift of independence and self-esteem and the freedom to choose. And I'm very lucky to have parents who allowed me to spread my wings. I also have a lot of friends, and this is an issue that we talk deeply about at the Asian American Journalists Association in America, where, yeah, you're expected to be a doctor or a lawyer, and neither one of those professions start with a J, so what is this word that you're telling me about?
You could still be an engineer too, right?
Or an engineer, as long as it's, or working for the government even, it's a good paying job. It's probably, you know, a very highly revered job socially within their social circles. Not a lot of parents understand this passion we all have. But those of us who choose this, it is a passion. I mean, there's a reason why you're in this room. There's a reason why you've chosen this at a time in the world where it is the most critical for you to be a journalist, but at the same time the most difficult, because it is an industry that is contracting and changing and molding itself in various forms. And how do you find your role in it? Being a doctor, you save lives, you work in a hospital, fine, check mark, done. Being an engineer, you go work at Samsung or another firm, and Apple, Google, wherever, check mark, done. You know, same with a lawyer. What you need to do is be authentic to yourself, and it may be difficult. You're an adult. You're not a child forever. Yeah, you're going to need the support of your parents, but at some point you're going to need to cut those apron strings. Your parents might not appreciate me telling you this right now, but at some point you have to make your own decisions. And what is going to guide you in life? Are you going to follow somebody else's vision for yourself? Is that going to make you happy? Or are you going to have the courage and the bravery to say, this is what I'm passionate about? And perhaps through your passion and your dedication to this, you will win your parents over, and you will win family over eventually.
You know, obviously, we love the profession and we work in it, and they're not always all the financial rewards that can come with doing this job, and sometimes it's at great personal cost as well. But why do you think the perception of being a journalist is so unstable in the minds of a lot of people? I think that obviously we have trust issues with the general public, but even with our own families, and trying to convince them that this is an honorable profession.
I think journalists are the worst at marketing themselves, right? We are. Why? Because we're not the story. Because if you're a good journalist, it's never about me. And so it should not be. And if it is about you, then you should think about why you're here. But I think that's part of the issue, that we as a profession feel that our work speaks for itself. And yet, as a unified group, we don't defend ourselves. But it's not our role to defend ourselves. Our role is always to antagonize and ask questions and be critical, even if it is to ourselves. I think that's one reason. I think politically you've seen, not only in the United States, believe me, in much of Asia and around the world, that the moment somebody doesn't like a story, it's easier to criticize the messenger than the message, because truth is hard to attack. But if we question the purveyor of truth and we question the source, then it's easier to attack. That's another reason.
I think also sometimes we're our own worst enemies. There's a great unevenness in the skills and the practitioners that we have out there.
Yes.
And sometimes if a story falls apart, like we're seeing right now with 60 Minutes and the Benghazi story, we begin to lose the public's trust.
Mm-hmm.
How do we get that back? How do we regain that as journalists?
You are only as good as your last story. But I think that you have got to hold yourself to a higher standard, because everybody is going to attack you constantly. But the thing is, you cannot be lazy. In journalism, you're constantly defending your story. People are going to say, well, who is this guy? Where's your source? Who's this person? Who's that person? And if you've done your homework, if you've done your job as a journalist, if you've ticked all the boxes that Kevin has taught you, that this program at HKU has taught you, and that you've checked the boxes of a profession at a standard of quality that you've been taught, that's how you can effectively keep pushing ahead. But look, unfortunately, sometimes a spoiled apple can ruin the bunch. Unfortunately.
Let's deconstruct your career a little bit, because I think it's always a good way. I mean, obviously you've had a lot of success, but tell me about the first job. How did you get that first job? What did it take?
The first job, I was not a success. and it wasn't my fault. The first job, I was graduating from Ryerson School of Journalism. This is a very competitive program. Thousands of students compete to get one of 100 slots. I was very lucky to have been chosen. I excelled. I loved it. There was
BCTV?
yeah, the BCTV recruiter flew to Toronto and wanted to get some of the top students. I interviewed with the assignment editor of the time, and I think what made me perhaps a little bit more valuable in his eyes was that I had another internship lined up already. And I said, look, I mean, I really want to work for you. I've heard great things. This is a news organization that I want to cut my teeth in. But please, I'd love for you to, choose me, but I kind of need to know quickly because I have to give these other guys an answer. And that was not a lie. They had just given me a scholarship, and they wanted me to work like next week. And the assignment editor said, no, you got the job. So it was good. It was good. So I flew out there. It was my first job, but it was also the first time I was living out of the house, that I left the house. I mean, I was living on my own. It was my first job. I'm in a new city. I mean, it was crazy, but I loved it. I loved it because it was like adventure and like really pushing all my buttons. Like I was completely out of my comfort zone. I love being out of my comfort zone. And I hope all of you love being out of your comfort zone, that's why we're journalists, right? So
what made you stand out from all those other applicants? I mean, the fact that you already had an internship and that you're offered another one as well. What was it? Were you working harder?
don't
Did
know.
you have a better reel? This is the kind of
Maybe.
secret they're all trying to unlock at this point.
Maybe. I don't know. Wow, I've never thought about that way. I think being a television correspondent, because TV is so, I hate to say it, but it is a little superficial, right? Like, the standard of journalism that I hold myself to is very, very high, but what you see is what you see, and in that is the superficiality of television. It's the image. I know what makes good journalism. I put it on every day, but what elevated my work above the rest, I think it's the strength of your writing. I think it's the sense of pacing. I think it's the sense of your personality, but not too much, but just enough, and maybe just a little balance, and maybe then you move a little forward, but just enough. And it's not scientific, but I think you have to find your way. It is a science, but at the same time, when you watch what you watch, you respond emotionally. And you don't know why you're smiling, but I know why you're smiling because I wrote it that way. I put the picture to the image that way. I chose that bite. But at the same time, there might be a little bit more magic that I can't quantify for you. You've got that magic.
Thank you.
A lot of successful people who've had extended careers in television has that magic. So where do you find your magic? Can you engineer your magic? No, you cannot ever engineer authenticity. But what you can do is be brave enough to let it happen naturally. And that is, I think, the key to magical television, which is to be brave enough to be natural.
And I think we also realize that you do get help on the way. There are people there
Absolutely.
that guide you through this process. And that's the next question I have for you. Did you seek out mentors when you first got into that newsroom? And if you did, were they men or women? And who were more helpful in that process? We know in some cases newsrooms can be notoriously competitive environments. People are there sometimes to stymie your career rather than help it. So what did you encounter when you first got there?
I was not a smart kid at all. I started my career an island I felt like an island of one. I felt like I was coming into a newsroom and completely intimidated by everything, and just hoping that the strength of my work would speak for itself. So naive. But I was not smart enough early on in my career to seek out mentors, to seek out leaders in the newsroom to help me. But I was lucky enough that there were people there who saw my work and said, "You know what, kid? Let me just show you. If you did it this way and this way, you got it." And these people showed up. I was smart enough to accept that and realize what a gift it was. I wasn't smart enough to ask for it. Absolutely. Why do I give back? Why do I sit here with you guys? Why do I participate with AAJA? It's all about paying it forward, because the career that I have would not exist without the people who have helped push me to where I am today. This is not a fruition of one person's efforts. I have an incredible partner. I have an incredible family. I have supportive friends who understand why I can't go to their wedding or why I can't go to a family dinner. At work, I've had people who have emerged as mentors, who have guided me, who have given me more of their time and secret sauce up here, and really life lessons. And I've been lucky enough to realize, wow, this doesn't happen all the time, so I better shut up and listen. And I mean, I got this job at Bloomberg because I was recruited by somebody who I met and enjoyed keeping a relationship with at a professional and became a personal level through my work at AAJA as a broadcast teacher for JCamp and as a co-director for that program. We were in New York, and Bloomberg sponsored one of the sessions and the receptions for JCamp.
JCamp is your training program for young journalists.
Exactly.
Well, obviously those relationships are critically important.
Yes.
And I don't think any of us have gotten, some of the jobs that we've gotten if we didn't know someone somewhere, or at least seek them out. But on the same notion, enemies are a big part of a newsroom as well. How do you avoid them? How have you avoided your enemies in the past? How do you work around those people that want to see you fail?
Yeah. It's, thankfully they are few and far between. But when it happens, it's very off-putting, because you think that you're part of a huge family and we are all supportive of each other and push each other forward. And what I would just say is just ignore this negative energy and focus on your own positivity. And that's really, at the end of the day, what you can do. Because nobody can attack you for your good journalism. I mean, your work should speak for itself, right? And nobody can attack the truth of your work. That's what I would say.
Okay, let's shift again. Tell us your most embarrassing moment on air, and how did you
On the
recover it?
air?
On the air.
Okay, but this was on the air, but this was in school, so it didn't happen on the air, thank God.
You made all your mistakes in school. That's what I tell them.
I did.
Okay.
So so this was pretty funny. This was very embarrassing. Okay, so we did a practicum where Ryerson has very much a hands-on program. So we had a radio booth that would put on news programming for the entire school. And part of the broadcast class was you take different roles. So one day you'd be the producer, and that day I was the anchor. So I just read the copy, right? So we were practicing me reading the copy, but you have your IFB in. I don't know if they practice with that.
Production is, you know what an IFB is, right?
Yeah, an earpiece. Exactly. So the producer is talking to you while you're so like you'll see me anchor, but I'll be talking, but at the same time somebody will be talking to me. So I'm talking while somebody's talking to me. That's kind of hard to get used to. Well, that's what we were practicing that day, and I didn't know we were practicing it that day. So I read this copy, and suddenly the producer gets in my ear, and I pause, and then I continue, and I walk out of the class, and they're all laughing at me, and I'm like, what? I had apparently read the copy like this. 400 workers in Mississauga were laid off today.
Commas are important.
Yes. Right at that point, somebody's talking to me. That was kind of embarrassing. Yeah, thank God it was school. Everybody's like, yeah, good for them.
Everybody's going to have one of those in their career at some point. It's just how you recover from it, right? Well, let's move from that to deconstructing your award-winning work. When you went out to do a piece, and in Ohio you won a number of different awards for consumer and investigative reporting, did you know that was going to happen when you went out? Did you say, this is the story that has enough resonance within our community that if we do a good job on this, we could take it beyond just another story?
I think every story should be like that. I think every story should get your award-winning effort. And whether or not I realized it at the time, no, there was this one story that I won for that literally I put together that day. It was, and the idea of putting that story together came about in a flash. And I put that story together with my cameraman in about 2 hours. And it won an award. Why? Because it was a different way to tell a standard story. It was a little innovative. What was
the story and how did you do it?
I did a story about school levies. Yay! Boring. What's school levy? A school levy is the taxes that each individual homeowner pays so that the schools would get enough revenue to pay their teachers. And in Ohio, this was very backward and actually non-constitutional 4 times, but still insisted that this was the only way to pay for kids' education. So I did a story about how one community was trying to up the school levy, and there was a lot of consternation about it. And I told it in a way that basically I basically boiled it down to a few cents and showed in one hand, like, this is what you're this is what you're actually voting against or for. $1.25 or enough to pay for a Snickers bar, right? That's what you're voting against for these kids.
Illustrating the example.
I illustrated the example. Well, if you take a look at that, yeah, you could afford a chocolate bar so that these kids will have textbooks next year, right? So that was a stand-up.
Simple concept, but it makes a big difference, especially with television.
Right, and it was a different way to tell that same story. And it was a stand-up, and I told it, but I think the reason why that won an award was because we're often asked to report on the same themed stories all the time. And yeah, you could be very, like, you're doing a disservice to your viewer, to your reader, if you just give it a haphazard treatment that is cliche, because 5 other reporters have covered it the exact same way you have. So how are you going to elevate it and make it different? That's how you bring your value add as a journalist. I think I did that day, and
you were recognized for it.
I was recognized for it.
One more question from me, and then I'm going to turn it over to you guys, so put your thinking caps on. You moved into business news after this, and the famous Watergate source Deep Throat said, follow the money. That's what you've been doing with your career ever since. Now, the audience for business news is more specialized, and in some cases smaller, but some would argue more influential. How do you see this kind of reporting, and how important is it?
To me, I think if you understand business, you understand how the world works. You will understand why people are protesting in the street. You will understand why these people are on strike. You will understand why this beautiful tree that has been here for 150 years is about to be
Let me
ripped
put
down.
you on the spot. Typhoon Haiyan. What does economics and business tell us about what's happening there? Are we able to learn anything?
We know that that's a very poor country. We know that it is going to take a lot of international effort and aid and money to be able to get that country back on its feet. We also know that, preliminary speaking, it's probably a $15 billion storm in terms of damage. We also know that only $2 billion is insured. So that means this very poor nation that is still an emerging market for Southeast Asia has a bill upwards of another 12 to $14 billion that it has to foot itself.
It's a lot that economics can tell us, and also how other nations have contributed in that relief effort.
Right.
100,000 coming from China.
Yes.
1.7 million coming from New Zealand. 100 million coming from the U.S. initially. How does this play out geopolitically? How does that vying for influence affect future markets?
It's a great question, because right now I think internationally, I think China also gave not that much money.
100,000.
Right. I didn't want to.
And you look at all of those political factors that influence that potentially, the fact that there's a territorial dispute. Even in Hong Kong,
Yeah.
The coverage has been, somewhat absent because of the Manila bus shootings.
Yeah.
And so, but all of these things in some ways have an economic factor to them.
They have an economic factor. China is a huge influencer in the region, and what it does and what it says is highly regarded and watched. So the message is, it is what it is. So people are going to read into it however they're going to read into it, but it does not match.
Yeah, and are they abdicating in some ways responsibilities in the region and letting the U.S. come in with that U.S. pivot to Asia?
There is that argument, and the United States and China are engaging for the first time military partnership drills in Hawaii. Just happened last week where PLA did exercises in Hawaii for the first time on U.S. soil. So, and economically, these are two world partners in trade. Geopolitically, they are not. We are all living in this world together, but playing a very delicate dance with each other, because we all depend on each other. It's almost like we're all balanced on the same boat in the ocean. But if somebody tilts in somebody else's direction the wrong way, the boat kind of starts tilting the wrong way and water starts leaking into the boat. This is the world in which we live.
And those waves are often made by money.
Absolutely. But back to your point about the Philippines, right? Look at the devastation of the Philippines. It is very much part of a broader economic story of excess manufacturing without environmental controls. It's about climate change. It's about a poor nation who many of the homes are not built to withstand 150-mile winds. And so when a super typhoon lands on your shores, it's unfortunately the perfect storm. And there are more of these storms to come, unfortunately. And that's what understanding the economics of a nation and the world will tell you about, even events of this magnitude, Mother Nature. You wouldn't think so.
You can go much deeper when you know the economics of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, questions from the audience?
just want to add another piece of fact to a discussion of Typhoon Haiyan. China just added another 10 million RMB donation to the relief effort in Philippines. So the 10,000 was not correct at this moment.
You know, that was resulting initially. There was a lot of argument within China itself whether that should happen or not. So, but yeah, it's an ongoing economic story as well, economic component to the typhoon.
Yeah, good for China. I hope it gives more.
Hi, I'm just interested in your background in business and how you made the transition between the type of reporting that you were doing before you started working at Bloomberg.
I was a general assignment reporter, so I did the storms and the bad weather and the city hall fights and you name it. I mean, whatever you see in local news, I was often assigned to it. And I was assigned to a lot of stuff, from crime to tragedy and all of that stuff. You cut your teeth. You get a thick skin. And you let your truth drive you forward. And but the general assignment reporting, truly what Kevin was saying, is that it kind of all does boil down to money. You know, why did that little girl die crossing the road? Because the traffic light was out. Why? Because City Hall didn't flow enough funds to get it fixed. Why? Because the voters voted against the tax increase to blah, blah, blah. Why? Because manufacturing has been depleted in Ohio and people are losing their jobs. Why? Because a global economy means that manufacturing has been outsourced to cheaper nations. Why? Because, so you see, that little girl dying trying to cross the street because that traffic light was out. It's all tied into a broader story. And if you can and that's the thing, if you can understand how the world works from a macro point of view, you can understand how the world works from a minute and micro point of view. And it just elevates your skill as a journalist. It really does. I think one of the most important things that you will do as a journalist is to connect those dots.
Angie talked to me before she came and she said they don't all have their hands up. I'm going to be curious about their commitment to this profession.
Hi, what's the one thing or several things that you wish you've done early in your career that you didn't get to do before?
No. I wish that I was a little bit more sophisticated about office politics. I really do. They don't teach a class like that at college. I think we should. I'd love to teach it because to understand your role as okay, so yes, you're a journalist, right? But I didn't get the fact that I should be looking out for mentors or to even push myself or advocate for myself. I didn't do that until a really mid-career, right? I'm still learning how to do that. I really am not that great at it. And other people who are, because they get it, they're more with it. Things are happening, and I always thought that my work could speak for itself. And I think you have to also advocate for your work, which means advocating for yourself. So I wish I learned that lesson much earlier on in my career, because I think it could have helped me. I do? Oh, thanks. I don't know if I'm effective, but I just do it. But look at I got criticized for my picture. They're like, why do you have white space in the bottom? I'm like, I don't know how to figure out how to. I just did it once. I don't have another 10 minutes to figure it out. So I'm not very successful with the picture part, but yeah, I have. I think it's about sharing the story in a different way on a different platform. And so as a journalist, I think what you always want the most viewers for your story. I mean, you worked hard on your story. It's an important story. I mean, if it's a story that you've done, you believe in it. So Twitter is just really another platform in which to share that story. I also use it to pass on other stories that I think are interesting and maybe add some personal thoughts or engage with people. I usually don't engage with, I think you're great, or I love that dress, or, it's like, but if you're like, oh, what do you think of Janet Yellen, blah, blah, blah. Oh, well, that's interesting. Boom, So I kind of do that.
I just want to add on to the question earlier that the one Sarah asked. Have you always known about funds and bonds and tax rates, exchange rates, all these economic things before you became a Bloomberg reporter?
I mean, I knew it from a very peripheral level and certainly not as intense or deep or in-depth as I do now. So how did I get to this level? You commit to it and you do your homework and you just engage. This is my beat. In the same way that if you were given a beat like science, well, you have to be a scientist to have a science beat, right? I mean, if you are, this is great. I mean, what value add? But at the same time, some of the best journalists who cover that are from a 10,000-foot view, because they can explain it to a wider audience, understand the complexity of the story, but able to communicate that simply and engagingly. And that's what I hope I do. Our audience is very sophisticated. They know what they know. But at the same time, anybody could be watching. What I try to do in my reporting is obviously communicate the nuances of why this is an important business story, but explain it in a way that I would explain it to my mom or, a friend of mine who doesn't really follow business but is a smart cookie. So it's the ability to interpret and to tell that story simply is really your role as a journalist. How you can do it effectively is if you know your stuff. It's important to know your stuff. And if you don't know your stuff, then get to know your stuff.
Actually, I want to ask a question that maybe already discussed. I was not from the beginning, and I want to be a business journalist, but I don't have economic background as in my previous degrees. Or I've worked for 3 months as an intern as a business reporter, but when it comes to financial reporting and banking things, I'm really worried. I can't understand these things. And while I was working as an intern, I just focused on some demand and supply things of some food items and how tourism is going on, such stuff. So how do you see I can combat those obstacles which are ahead? I have to climb uphill. So
Can you go back to school and get a business degree? Is that a possibility for you?
I don't think, but I can study myself, self-study, I think.
Okay, then I think that if you're really serious about business journalism, that you basically drown yourself in business journalism. And if you don't know, there are books that will teach you, and by the end of the year, you sound like you know what you're talking about, because you do know what you're talking about. You only get there if you commit to the work and effort that starts today. If that's truly what you want, you can get there. It's going to be a lot of hard work, but you'll get there. But you got to put in a lot of effort, and you got to prove it to a lot of people. But you can't fake your way to this. I'm not going to give you a job based on 3 months of an internship and have you cover banks. You don't know what you're talking about. I can't. That responsibility should not be wasted on somebody who doesn't know. So prove to me a year from now that you do know. Go educate yourself. Understand. Hey, work at a bank if you want. Work in business. If you want to cover banks, work at a bank. Understand how banking works. That's another way that you can get into business journalism.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi. Just want to understand, how are you assigned beats at Bloomberg or any other business news organization? Is it just that when a person is starting out, you cover 1 or 2 commodity-related stories, for instance, and that then becomes your beat and you start pursuing that? Or is it more so about your knowledge base and what you already know? How does beat allocation happen in business?
I work in television, so we're generalists as business journalists. So I talk about bonds, commodities, forex, economic policy, central bank decisions. I mean, I talk about everything. So, but for my print colleagues, not necessarily sure how that's allocated. But I think if you have expertise in one thing, at Bloomberg we do have specific teams. So we have a banking team, and we have a bonds team, and we have a this team and a that team. And clearly the people who work on that team is because they have experience and knowledge having worked that beat. So yeah, part of it is much of your own interests as much as how effective you can be in that role.
Hi Angie, my question is about starting out as a reporter. I'd like to be a reporter, and what do you think your first reel should be about? I mean, I don't have a lot of experience, it's just potential. So how do you put that into work? And how important do you think are internship, and what kind of internship do you think we should look for if we want to go into TV reporting?
Internships are few and far between. So if you get an internship, just go do it. Gosh, I mean, the industry has changed so much, and it is definitely not the one that I entered. So I can't tell you the path, because the path is constantly changing, which makes it so exciting for everybody in this room starting out, because you really can define your own path. You know, you're asking me for what if I do this, this, and this, can I get there? What I'm telling you is, you used to know that if you do this, this, and this, you can get here. But I've seen people jump and get there by creating their own opportunities and being entrepreneurial in their own experience. And what do I mean by being entrepreneurial? Writing your own blog, freelance articles for, blogs or Time Out or whatever, and just creating your own opportunities can get you further than an internship. Internships are great because it shows the future employer that, okay, they've got a standard set of experience, they've been filtered through by this company, and they've learned a couple of skill sets. But really, I want to see that you have passion, that you have talent, and that you have tenacity. Those are critical things for me as well.
I was just wondering, when you first went to Bloomberg, were you an anchor right away, or what did you do when you first went there?
So I did market reports from the Chicago Board of Trade, and I would do the reports for different stations across the Midwest and basically do business stories. And I joined actually in 2008, a couple of months before the world decided to melt down. And it was just incredible to see and have a front row seat to that. So anchoring is a skill set, but you can't get to anchoring unless you've been a reporter, I think. That's my personal opinion. I think that unless you've had your hands dirty and you've knocked on doors and you know what it takes to put a story together and you know why a story comes together the way it does, I think that you can't be as an effective anchor as I would want to watch in an anchor. It's just my personal preference. I mean, one of my personal heroes has now passed, but Peter Jennings was that for me. Probably, I hope you guys know who I'm talking about, right? I know. He passed away a couple of years ago due to lung cancer. He was the anchor for ABC News, also a fellow Canadian. And I had the pleasure of meeting him, actually, while Ohio was the battleground state for the nation, and everybody filtered through there, including Peter Jennings, who worked out of our office. And but he, for me, was the real deal. This is a man who could dissect and tell a story without a script because he knew what he was talking about, and because he had done it in the same way that Kevin has done it in hot zones around the world. That was Peter Jennings. Peter Jennings was in hot zones around the world as a reporter and rose to the ranks of being that network's anchor because he was the real deal. So that's a long answer to a very short question.
Like from your point of view, like from your experience in Bloomberg, do you think that because obviously you have very direct impact on the stories you write, but from an editor's point of view, do you think in any way that diminishes that direct impact, or does it strengthen it, or does it broaden your impact on more stories? You know, what do you think about that?
Are you saying that I'm sorry, can you explain that?
So, like, for example, if you were to become, like, editor, then you think, would that reduce your connection to the story in a way, or does that...
When you say editor, what do you mean by editor? I think as journalists, we're all collaborators, and at the end of the day, what comes out of my mouth is what I say. I'm the final stopgap for whatever I want to say. So there's a lot of collaboration, but at the same time, it's the words that I choose to use to explain the story. And that's my decision as a journalist. We can collaborate on themes, we can collaborate on ideas, we can collaborate on research. At the end of the day, my contribution to my work is how I communicate it. Does that make sense? I think that is very, very important, because I could talk to you like gobbledygook, or I could talk to you like a human being. That's my choice. That's my choice as a journalist. It's an art I choose very carefully in how I explain a story because I want the impact to be real and I don't want it to be diluted by confusion. So if you're confused, I've not done my job. So I try very hard not to confuse you, even though it's a very complex issue.
Oh, okay. I was like, okay.
Back to about advocating for yourself. How do you do that in a newsroom, and also how do you seek out mentorship?
You impress by how does somebody impress me? I just want to see passion. I just want to see if they're smart. And I want to see if they're motivated in the way that one should be motivated in journalism. Why are you in journalism? Why are you even here? Can you tell me? What role do you envision for yourself? And so I think that if you can understand where I'm coming from, perhaps you can try to understand how you can present yourself in your work environment. So you show by working hard and being really, really great at what you do. But what impresses often and always is going above and beyond. I love proactive thinkers. We love non-rote performers, as in, here's a job, oh, it's done. Here's another job, oh, it's done. Here's a job, oh, it's done. Okay. How about here's a job, oh, what's this? Oh, you did this too? Oh, what's this? Oh, okay. Oh, and you want to pitch 2 more stories here. Oh, and in fact, you've already called those people and they're ready to go. Oh, well, it's all done. Why don't we just do that? Create those opportunities for yourself. Be entrepreneurial in the job that you have, right? Yes, you're doing your job. Great. Don't ignore doing your job, but how can you do more? And in that way, you win admirers in your office, and you will see people paying more attention to you. And the people that you admire in the office, journalists whom you enjoy their work, don't be afraid to say, look, I think your work is really great. Can I ask you how you did the story and why you put it together? Can you show me how did, and once you start having those conversations, you'll see who is willing to engage with you and who is not. And the people who don't, well, they don't, and it's not personal. Might be busy or whatever. But the people who do, well, you've got an advocate, you've got a mentor, right? But be respectful of people's time. Remember, they are spending time with you. They could be home hanging out with their peeps and drinking and having fun, or doing other stuff, or hanging out with their family. Like, time is valuable for a lot of people. So be respectful of that. And when you show that you get it and you're respectful of it and you're grateful for it, I've got all the time in the world for you.
Hello. Hi. Yeah, so I just kind of want to ask you about your values when you are doing journalism and in this industry. So, I mean, it seems to me that from a young age you were kind of passionate, already set on doing journalism. And I just want to ask, what are you specifically looking for in journalism? In the end of the day, what do you look for that only journalism can maybe offer you? Because obviously, as in your early 20s, you can be doing anything, but you chose journalism, and yeah, what is it about journalism that attracted you so much? Is it like the storytelling aspect, or the informing aspect? What is it?
I loved journalism because it required a lot of things. And what I loved about journalism the most was that it would never pigeonhole me. I would never be just that one thing. As a journalist, you can be anything. You can report on fashion. You can report on business. You can report on science. You can report on crime. You could be a foreign correspondent. You could be working in America. You could be local news reporter. You could be a weather reporter. Like, you could do so much in journalism, and that's what I loved about it. At the end of the day, you're constantly using your brain. You're constantly engaging with people. You're constantly touching and feeling the world as a reporter. You're seeing things that you would never see. I've seen things that I would never go seek out for myself, like, why am I here in East Cleveland after 5 o'clock when all the cops have gone home shackled behind their padlock doors, and I'm here doing a live hit, and I think that was just a gunshot that I heard. But, I mean, this is a life experience. This is a life experience. I love that experience as much as anything else. I got to sit down with Sir Paul Smith the other day for an hour, talking about fashion and philosophy and business. And that was as important of a conversation to me as the dock worker who was striking in front of Cheung Kong Center because all he wanted was another 50 cents so that he could afford his shoebox in the sky, if he was lucky enough, right? So that's what I loved about journalism, and that's what I continue to love about journalism, is the adventure.
Hi. Actually, when I watched Bloomberg Television, they have a lot of live interview with government officials and CEO, just really big shots. So what is the most tough interview that you got yourself into, and how do you tackle it as a live television reporter, anchor reporter? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. They're all challenging because, as I was telling Kevin earlier today, there's one thing doing an interview for soundbite or a quote for a newspaper, and then there's another thing doing it live for a broadcast audience. The question is as important as the answer. The dance is as important as the interview itself. And what do I mean by the dance? It means there's a pace, there's a flow. And at the end of the day, it's not just one person asking a question and one person answering it. It's a conversation that you're playing out in real time for a live audience. That is a very interesting skill set. But at the end of the day, what are the best? I mean, I'm still trying to be really good at it. Okay, so I'm still. There are a lot of people who just are incredible, and why are they good? The common theme is that they're listeners. So they know what they want to ask, they know what they want to, there are some challenging questions that they know they got to get in there. But you're constantly in a mind battle, right? Because they'll give an answer, and you, in your responsibility as a journalist, is not for yourself, is you're advocating for the people who are watching, who would love to ask the question you're about to ask. So are you going to waste it on asking some inane question, or are you going to channel the force of the voices who can't ask and challenge the CEO and say, why are you polluting this air? What are the policies that you are enacting to make sure that Hong Kong has clean air? Your contribution to this and that and all the rest. I mean, you listen for the answer and then you engage. And you challenge. You're respectful, obviously, all the time, but you're listening. Why? Wait, but why did you just... Wait a second, but you said this, but wait a second. We know this to be true. How do you respond? Oh, you said this, but critics say that this, and this, and you're not doing enough. What do you say about that? So, it's a dance. And you only get to be a really good dancer if you do a lot of homework.
Hi, Angie. Just a question. As someone who's had experience working in North America, Canada, Asia, can you describe to me like some of the differences and what you don't like, what you like about working in Asia and compared to like working in North America?
I think because I work for an international company, I think the quality of the work is the same. I think the difference is the stories and the system in which I work. And by system, I mean the country itself. Hong Kong, Asia. I mean, what's fascinating about Asia is that the sensibilities are... I'm still learning about it. And yet, it influences geopolitics here in a way that only if you live here you can understand. That's what I love about reporting in Asia, is that I'm in a part of the world that I would never experience if I wasn't living here. I would also say I'm getting to understand a part of the world that I would never understand at this deep level if I wasn't reporting from here. I think that a lot of journalists from abroad might come here, parachute here, and do the standard stories, but I think some of the best work from Asia comes from reporters who have been here for a long time and who have been here and understand the story in a broader context, in a historical context and in a social context. And so I would say that's the difference.
I think we'll wrap it up there because Angie has been up for a long time today and is very generous with the time. Listen, the things that you said today, I think, really resonate with us as a whole, especially when you're talking about proactivity. I think as competitive as today's environment is, you really do have to make your own grades. And especially with your internships, those of you about to go into them, you're working for someone like Angie, you're going to Bloomberg or somewhere else, if you're waiting to be told what to do, you're not going to make it. And I think that, as you said, you really have to be out there and get past that shyness and the earnestness and really be aggressive.
Yes, absolutely.
So, obviously, that's how you got where you're at.
Well, I want to take
time as well to thank you, Kevin, for inviting me, and really to thank all of you for letting me talk for so long. My goodness. Look, I wish all of you just the best of luck. But
we also have your outfit for tomorrow morning, so you can wear this, your polo shirt.
Thank you. Thank you, Kevin. You don't need luck. You just need to believe in yourself, find your voice, use it. Because when I'm old and gray, and when Kevin is old and gray, which is not for a long time to come, we expect you to push and to ask those hard questions and speak truth to power when we can't. But we're depending on you. Don't let us down. Thank you.
As the solar company files for provisional liquidation of July. Intel says the decision will give time to complete restructuring negotiations. The company may also pursue bankruptcy.
Thanks everybody for coming. Hope you got something out of it. And we'll see you in class.
And